Hello and welcome into the show. I am in the midst of a taper. So what that means is I have a race in, it's Sunday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So like 5 days, I guess, 4 days. I don't know how time works or how people count, but I have a race in 4 days. So I'm in the midst of tapering. Tapering basically means you built up all this running volume and you are just coasting into your race. So what I thought I would do is explain the concept of tapering, drop a little knowledge bombs on you, how you can do a taper, why you should taper, all those things. But first, let's get to some news because there's a lot of stuff going on. We've got Tara Dower out going for the Appalachian Trail record. I think someone's going to be going for the John Muir Trail record again starting tomorrow. So that is interesting. We just had a long trail. Will Peterson, I think his name is Sisyphus, trail name, because we love trail names on here. He just set the long trail record in the long trail. It's probably like the hardest trail that I've ever done. I got the record back in 2019 and it's since been lowered by like a day. I mean, it was one of those trails that I didn't know anything about. It's one of the few FKTs, at least the premier ones, that I've gotten without having done it entirely first. Like all the other ones, I'd done pretty much the whole trail, one direction or the other, before I'd gone after the fastest known time, FKT, fastest known time, basically the record, on them. And I hadn't done that on the long trail. I was shocked. I rolled my ankles a bunch, but still held on to a record. It was really good, but that record has gotten out of control. It's gotten so low. So Will Peterson, I hope that's right, on his birthday weekend, I believe, he got the record under 4 days. So like 3 days, 21 hours maybe. So that's some huge news. And now let's dive into some taper talk. So I haven't really done an episode in the midst of a race because I haven't really raced at all this year. I think I did one episode on why I didn't have the mindset to race, or I didn't really want to race. That was for a race in mid-August. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this one. Okay, so I am doing the Wasatch 100, and how I like to treat a taper is usually circle 2 weeks or so. So for the last 2 weeks leading into a race, that's where you're going to drop mileage. And you can think of it as like the 50-50 rule. So that first week, so with 2 weeks to go, the general strategy is to do 50 and 50. So you cut your volume in half, 50% the first week, and then you cut it in half another 50% the second week. And this is like a really good general thing with athletes I coach. This is kind of where we'll start, but with a few wrinkles added in because that's a whole week plan, but you can also do little tweaks and things of like 10 days out is pretty good. I mean, with studies and a few different things to do a hard effort, not like a race effort or anything, but you can do like a moderate to harder, like hill workout, like a confidence boosting workout is what I like to call it. So maybe that's doing an interval workout on a hill or something, or just feeling light and springy, but you're not going to exertion. You're not going to like complete exhaustion. The goal really is to build that confidence. And with 10 days out, there's enough time to recover. So in that week, in every week, you have these little nuances that you can do personally. And I think this is where it's really valuable to work with athletes across multiple races as a coach. And I'll just share from me, so I don't want to throw anyone else out there with out there knowledge. So what I really like personally is I found 2 days off in a row is like a magical reset. I think as I'm designing my own training going into the fall, we'll get into that in a little bit. That's going to be kind of a highlight is I feel like I don't need 1 day off, but when I get 2 days off in a row, it's like a magical reset. Legs feel perfect. I feel ready to go. So what I like to do with the taper is schedule in that 2 week period, the 2 week taper, pretty standard taper period, is 2 different times where I get 2 days off in a row. So this might be right when the taper starts. So let's take this one. I finished the Ruby Crest Trail 75 miles with 18 or 19,000 feet of gain, finished that last Monday. And so I took I ran on Tuesday. I wanted to get a little bit of quicker work. And then I started my taper Wednesday. I took Wednesday, Thursday off, and then did a really short run on Friday, one run and a backpacking trip on Saturday, a hike on Sunday, and then I'll probably take 2 days off, probably like Monday, Tuesday this week, shakeout Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. But I like to fit in 4 total off days in 2 back-to-back days. That's how I do it. That's how my body likes it. So that's what I stick to. It's one of the things where once you get a taper nailed and you know what works, you don't need to change it no matter what the distance. Maybe you can shorten it by a day, shorten it by a couple days, change a couple things. But once you know how your body likes to taper and show up on race day morning feeling good, stick with it. That is magic. And so the 50-50 rule is pretty good to start with. And then the little things of like, oh, I like the multiple days off in a row, just makes me feel like I haven't run or haven't exhausted myself recently at all with just 2 days off. So that's kind of how I like to do it. So the other thing in a taper that I like to do is this is when you could really dive into the course more. Like you probably have a pretty good idea what you want to do, pretty good idea what your goals are, because that's pretty important in training and moving towards hitting those goals basically, and how you're ramping up training and designing it. But like Wasatch 100, what I have done is dive into it and kind of an overview, since no one out there is probably running it. If you are, cool, see you out there. But what I like to do is zoom in and then zoom out. So to zoom in, the beginning up through mile about 8.5. So basically mile 3 to 8.5. There's like 5,000 feet of climbing roughly. I don't have the stats in front of me, but that means that I have already in my head thought about, I'm going to have a goal for that first 8.5 miles. And it's probably going to be a conservative goal where like, I don't want to go faster than this amount of time to cover that 8.5 miles. And then from that 8.5 miles to the finish, I might have a completely separate goal, because then the race becomes 91.5 miles with 19,000 feet of gain, which feels more manageable with probably a lot more runnable periods than the initial 100 miles with 24,000 feet of gain. It goes from, I don't know, what would that be? Like 200 feet a mile versus 240 feet a mile average gain and descent. So that's basically where I zoom in and zoom out. So on that larger scale, and then also looking at the race, this is what you can use all that time you're not training with. You've given up 50% of the time, or you get back 50% of the time you were training. So now you can look at things like this. Another thing with Wasatch is the second half is a lot harder than the first half. No, I completely messed that up. Thank you for bearing with me. Err on me. The second half is a lot easier than the first half. And by easier, it's mostly a lot more descending or stays high. It's never really that flat or anything like that, but it stays high and the climbs are shorter, punchier, but easier to transition through. There is a section kind of in that 30 to 50 range where it looks pretty hard. It can be pretty hot. And so that leads into the next point where I have been enacting like a heat protocol, because it's probably going to be about what peak temperatures are here in Bozeman or a little bit hotter, and just a sauna and heat protocols in general increase your hemoglobin, and I don't know, they have a lot of positive benefits along with being heat acclimatized. That's a hard word to say, probably a $2 word too. That's what I do physiologically. Psychologally, it is a lot of, so I'm a very visual learner. I think we've been through that on the podcast before. I can remember scenes and things in my head. I have many pictures. I can just, I don't know, imagine and think of things, but not so much just by like concocting something without having seen it, I guess would be how I would describe it. Okay. So basically I like to look up the actual scenes from the course. I've run on some of it. I like to rethink and put those images in my head of, I've done a couple like 3,000 foot climb, actually 4,000 foot climb plus in the Wasatch. So think back to how that felt, how it was going, what the terrain was like, because it's different than here. It's a lot more rock, but it's like the rock that you can trust. Like it's had so many feet on it that any loose rock or loose dirt has already been eroded away by footsteps. So there are like unstable and looser stuff, but anything technical in the Wasatch compared to Montana is a lot more stable and trustworthy. So that's a huge thing. I like to envision that. I like to think about it, and any runs that I'm doing. So this would be in that second week. So I'm not to my final week where the race is next week, basically. So on Saturday, I went out and tried to find some pretty similar terrain and test the shoes that I'm going to wear and just make sure that I like what I have on and that I'm going to be able to trust them. It's like I already knew I was going to wear those shoes. I just wanted to completely know, like 100% belief in the gear that I'm going to wear. So that's a huge thing that I work into the taper as well. Along with that mindset, that visualization, thinking through like, oh, the night will be tough. What do I need? It could be anything from a playlist, a crew manual, what I want my crew to do, looking at the changing temperatures. How about after the race? Where are we going to stay and shower? How about before? When are we going to get there? Are we going to take a shuttle or drive there? These are all things I want to figure out like days before the actual race, if not weeks, because that's what will alleviate the nerves, because, nerves can hit Wednesday, Thursday, whenever leading into the race. And so if you've gotten all these decisions done ahead of time, then you're ready to start your race. Because ideally let's just take 100. In 100, you want to have made all the decisions you're going to make ahead of time and let your crew know. So if your goal is to finish, it's like, I want to keep going, even if I have to sit for a while or if I have to slow down or whatever until I'm cut off by the race. So if you tell your crew that ahead of time, then when it's really hard and emotionally you want to quit, your crew can have you keep going because that's the plan. Or something like, I only want injury to slow me down. Or like last year for Javelina 100, which is a flat and fast 100, I wanted to see how fast I could run 100. So I told my crew, my plan is to push as hard as I can for as long as I can. And I certainly will blow up at some point, but I just want to see how I can get to that point. And then I want to get from there to the end. I don't want to quit. So I got to about 80 miles with, I don't know, maybe in 12 hours or so. And then it took like 4.5, 5 hours to do the last 20 miles. But I wanted to get to that blow up point, see what my body could do, see what pace I could hold, how long I could hold it. And that's what I did. So that was a completely different plan than you would expect for a 100 miler, because I just had a different goal then. I'd never pushed a pace like that or a race like that. And I wanted to, obviously. Okay. So the reason for tapering, whether it's an FKT or a trail race or just anything in life that's going to be physically exhausting, is you gain about 3 to 5% of performance. Like you perform 3 to 5% better depending on the person. Sometimes I think it actually could drop down to like 1%. So some people don't respond as well to a taper. I always thought that, but I'd never taken 2 days off in a row, and I find that to work really good for my body. So the thing is, it's very, very variable, very variable. I like that combo. The VV combo for every different person is you don't know how it's going to affect you until you actually do it. And then it's the trick of finding the perfect taper for you. Like some people, it's probably like some athletes that I coach, it's like want to stay on the same schedule. Maybe it's 5 days a week of running. We just drop the volume 50% on every day, or drop the intensity or whatever. So it's like sticking to the schedule matters the most to them, and especially with their life, like that's the thing that they're focused on and gives them comfort. So it's not the double up rest days or change what's happening on what days. Other athletes, it's like maybe it's that test the legs, want to feel confident, healthy, fast. And other athletes probably like not as confident with, I don't know, poles or a pack or something like that. And it's like, let's do every run, even if they're 30-minute runs with that gear, just to test it out. Or little things like, are you going to be running with poles and then stowing them? Like these are all little things that can work on during that taper, and ideally would have worked on for a couple months, especially leading into it. But they're just things to think about, and so that they're front of mind. And kind of you remember it. Like another thing in the same realm is with athletes, you would never train like without poles, but maybe in that last week you would practice just like 5 times in a 30-minute run, putting them in and taking them out. So it's just like second nature when you get to the event. One thing that I like to do is go out at night and just remember how to run with a headlamp, because the shadows are a little different. Things feel a little different. So it feels pretty valuable for me to just remember how it feels to see the rocks like that, how to step, how my eyes interact with it, especially downhill running, how you're picking up things, how far ahead you're looking, how to even tilt your headlamp. So these are all things that I like to put out there and focus on. It's all different for different athletes, but this is kind of how it works for me. So Wasatch, as I've kind of gone through this and landed upon things and how I want to do things, I always have this basic Google Doc that I send out to crew. And personally, this is different for everyone. What I like to do is have a pacer only focus, like number one goal. Your number one goal is navigation, and you have everything you need. I can take care of my calories. I can worry about pacing. I can do everything like that. But if I can get rid of any worry about going the right way or hitting a flag or a junction that might be unmarked or something, and my pacer can confirm, take care of that and take us the right direction, and all I have to worry about is fueling, hydrating, and moving, then we're all set. So I put on, that's my number one priority. And then below that, I put up like a number of things that are like nice and helpful, of just like, remind me to throw away wrappers, or when morning starts, so let's try to remember to put on some sunscreen, or just check in on certain things, or I'd like this electrolyte mix at aid stations. Things like that are all, as they say, gravy. But I think the one goal and one expectation for someone to execute really well is the best way to navigate that, and then you kind of co-attack everything else. So for me, for a pacer, it's I'm going to run my hardest. You make sure we're running the right way and I'm using those miles in the right direction. And then the other thing is I like to come up with a plan and share some of this with pacers, especially a spreadsheet. I like to make one that can update, where it's like, he got to, Brighton. That's a thing on Wasatch at this time. And then it'll update down the rest of the spreadsheet on where my projected time will be everywhere else. I've built a lot of these spreadsheets. I built some in my past career that use pretty complex formulas to, guess, to come up with a time that it thinks I'll get to the next crew aid station. So it just makes it easier on the crew to have a pretty round estimate. I always like to overshoot it just by a little bit. Internally, personally, what I'll do is I'll make a spreadsheet that has a similar thing, but it'll be set. I won't have to insert anything. And I like to, actually, my athlete I coach, Jameson Collins, who was on the podcast a month ago or so, should check him out. He taught me, he would save that spreadsheet as the background on his phone. So you wouldn't even have to open your phone to see kind of, it could be whatever you want. I like to have like 3 columns. So it's like miles or miles between, and elevation gain, and then like initial projection or estimate, or like goal time. Like one of those is the other column. And then it's just like a general overview of, you just click your phone. So it shows that lock screen, but it already shows all the information that you're looking for. So that's one thing, how I like to prepare as well. I think that's pretty much what a taper entails for me. Beyond that, it's coming up with a crew plan. I think checklist or something that's bullet pointed, where someone can, if someone's crewing you, they can just move down that checklist. So I like to do, like, I want this many bottles at this aid station. So Wasatch, there's 3 crewed aid stations. So it'll be like, first one, I think it's like Big Meadow or something. I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me. Big Water, something like that. I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, and I'm terrible with names if you didn't know. It'll be like Big Meadow aid station. I want 3 half-liter bottles with scratch hydration mix in them, and this many carbs, or this many gels, I guess, to hit this amount of carbs. Because the big rage now is like, you want to hit 90 grams of carbs, because that's what everyone is doing, and that's what the pros are doing, and they're winning stuff, setting course records like every single weekend. So that is what I'll have on my spreadsheet. That will tell the crew exactly what I'm looking for. And then like the second one, it'll be like, all right, night gear, that'll already be packed in probably like a gallon Ziploc bag where it's probably like a light wind jacket, a more powerful headlamp, because I'll have like a tiny backup, like thimble size light that would work, but it wouldn't be like ideal. I'll have that in my pack probably the whole time, but it'll be more substantial stuff for night. It'll be a little different. And then on the third one, it might be like, oh, now it's net downhill. I'm going to try to push it pretty hard. Maybe I have these, maybe, I don't know, you have a different pair of shoes that feel better going downhill, or get rid of your poles. Like all these little things, when I said earlier, like you want to make all your decisions ahead of time, it all comes back to this thing where your crew knows what you're doing. You know what you're doing. Your pacer knows what you're doing and what they're doing. No one needs to clarify what they're doing because you're all set. Because it's already going to take enough brain power and work out there. Like you might be up for 36 hours and your crew might be up and driving around too. And this is where it gives them time to get those other things. If you're like, oh, I really want lemonade or something, like they can run by the store because they already have everything else dialed. Like they got your flask filled, ready to change out. They got ice or whatever. They got night gear ready to change out, and they can just get that extra thing because it's one thing on the list. It doesn't add all these extra things. And I mean, that's usually the problem of you get into an aid station and you have this laundry list of things you want to do, but they don't know them. So they're trying to act on the fly as well. So that's kind of the taper style. This is when you dial in that crew plan, you dial in that pacer plan, you set expectations, you can work on things, but it's really about gaining confidence. Like, does a flat and fast run give you confidence? Does climbing a little more give you confidence? Does hanging out, socializing with your friends more? Does more rest? Does some flexibility work, stretching? Does a lot of visualization add benefit to your race? That's what tapering's all about. You want to enter in the best mindset. I almost said mind space because I meant to say headspace, but instead I said mind space. So I personally like to do a lot of visualization of just what it's going to feel like out there, especially for FKTs. I like to do the visualization of, this is the time I felt as tired as I'm going to feel out there. Or if you haven't before, this is how I expect I'm going to feel out there. And this is what I'm going to focus on. So a strategy for that would be on, let's say I've only done one FKT and I'd only done the Arizona Trail. I would be like, this was the time when I was hallucinating trees turning into witches, and this is how I'm going to deal with it. And the answer would be, I'm going to know which direction I'm going, and I'm going to follow the line on my phone. I'm going to be completely comfortable and have enough battery power or whatever to keep my phone charged, because I know that I'll be able to come out of this hallucinating state and exhaustion at some point. I don't know how long it'll be, but in the meantime, what I can do is continue to chip away at this FKT or this fast record or pace by following the line and just moving on that, trusting that I've done the work, I've put in the route, it's easy to follow, I know how to use my mapping software, and I can follow that as long as it takes for me to come back around and feel confident again. And this is another good thing for races, having your mapping software or whatever you're going to use to follow the course really dialed in, know how you're going to use it, and be confident using it, so that when you are tired or when you are alone or you don't see a flag for a while, all you have to do is pull out your phone, double check, and be like, all right, still on the right track, continue moving at the effort level, let's go. All right, that's kind of the taper plan and strategy that I use. I give athletes how things work. This wasn't probably that funny of an episode, but I guess something funny is when you taper, you do get like taper tantrums. So you feel like you suck at running, especially the first week of a taper. Like this week, I think I did like 44 miles or something. So like half of what I'd been doing pretty much before, and you just feel like you suck at running. It's pretty funny. But I think one thing that's helped that for me is these double days off, and then feeling less pressure to keep the days I'm running super light. So I can put more volume on less days if I want to in that first week of the taper. So I just feel a little bit more connected to running, a little more connected to the event I'm going to do, which is obviously longer than just a 30-minute run or something. So that's how I do it. Hopefully there's some strategies for you out there. The other thing during a taper that I'm going to start implementing, I started implementing before Tahoe, is I dropped the fiber intake a little bit because I think that decreases chances of stomach issues out there. And then, of course, hydrating to the correct level. I try not to change anything about my diet, which means not do anything insane. Like, you get to a race, don't go like out to dinner to spicy Mexican food the night before, but just keep everything the same, drop fiber a little bit, and just stay on top of hydration. Recently in the last year, I've also started packing my vest and gear and everything the night before. Say I like drive to a race, I'll have my vest all packed up, all the nutrition I'm going to start with, everything from the beginning, and I'll hang it on my steering wheel, and all my socks and shoes like on the floor, I guess is what you call it, floor mat. And then I'll put all the clothes I'm going to wear on the seat, so ready to go. Like, everything I need is right there. And then I'll usually have the perfect idea of what I'm already going to eat for a breakfast, something like that, even like an iced coffee drink that can really get the digestive system going, if you know what I mean. But that is your quick and dirty information on tapering, and hope feels useful. I don't know. All right. Thanks, guys. Love you all. Stay elite, my friends.